but putting it on your machine tool. Putting it on your machine tool. I guess the broadcast. Welcome everybody. I'm not sure whether we were on or not. Now we're live and so forth. So welcome to the Tom and Lonnie Show, and we're going to be talking about putting Zoom or Teams on your machine tool. I think we've all seen a lot of our machine tools, CNC and so forth. They've got PC front ends, and I think we've all seen that we're you run things like Microsoft Word on there or Excel and so forth. And I think we all figured it's just a matter of time before Zoom or Teams pops on there. So we've got an expert from Okuma today. In fact, let me introduce our participants. Let's see if we can bring them on board. There we go. Hey, Stephen. He's our moderator to keep us moderate. And then we got the good Dr. Tom Feldhausen from Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and then Chris Davala from Okuma, who is our that's the one. And we've got some good stories. We've got an Okuma hybrid. I think you heard Tom talk about it in one of our past meetings or chats and so forth. And but one of the things that we noticed on there is, hey, this thing's running Teams. And so the question is, okay, besides just participating in meetings while you're out there running your machine, what are some of the other things that we might be thinking about? And really, to me, it's pretty exciting. So I think what we're going to hear today, and we're going to chat about today, is not just, hey, some of the obvious things that would be going on, but some of the directions we're going, and we might also touch base on a couple of concerns as we're rolling on. I should also mention that our good friend Dr. Lonnie Love out of Oak Ridge National Laboratory, he had a last-minute major conflict. Nothing serious, but important enough that he got pulled from the show. But he will be back in February. I mean, how could you not, right, have a February show without the good Dr. Love? So with that, I'm going to turn it back. I'm going to turn it over to Chris Davala from Okuma. And Chris, I think you might have some slides and so forth. But number one, welcome to the show. Number two, thank you so much for for giving us a brief today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here, and thank you for having me. As you mentioned, we're going to talk about some machine tool communication with things like TeamViewer, Teams, Zoom, and also data collection to show how some of these recent events, I guess, with COVID have lended themselves to more need for data collection and using things like Teams on the control. So we'll just jump right into it. Let me share my screen. All right,
there we go. See that? Got it. It's just like being on the Okuma, and the screen pops up just like in Teams. All right, Chris, thanks. All yours.
Okay, so today we're going to discuss machine tool communication, meaning how a person can remotely communicate with their machine tool. So this gives the user the ability to do things like troubleshoot issues, whether it's applications or service related. They can monitor the progress of the machine tool asset as it's running, and also use this to make data-driven decisions based on feedback from the machine, instead of just kind of going with the old pencil and paper method and kind of swagging a guess at it. So first thing that comes to most people's mind in this case would be cybersecurity and all the risks associated with putting your machine tool on a network. Kyle Salibi from Oak Ridge National Labs did an excellent job of covering this topic in a previous Tom and Lonnie chat. So for this conversation, we're kind of going to stay away from cybersecurity and just ignore that for the moment, and just focus on the tools that we have to communicate with our machine tool. And we'll worry about cybersecurity later. So since the onset of COVID-19, many of us have been forced into learning new ways to stay connected while we work remotely. So whether your office was closed or you were stuck in quarantine, maybe, we've all faced situations where virtual communication was basically the only option we had. So what does that do to help the frontline essential workers who had to be at the shop making parts? Not much, really. So many of them didn't have the option to work remotely. Obviously, you can't make parts if you're sitting at home. So those people had to be in the shop or in the office getting their job done. But they still needed to have some support from some of the people that couldn't come in the office. So we had to find a good solution for that. So here you can insert your choice of digital communication tool. So applications like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, BlueJeans, TeamViewer is a little bit older one, but still useful, and many others. They became front and center kind of to allow people to communicate beyond text and phone calls. So they added back a little bit of the personal communication feel with video calls without having to be in person to actually do so. So how does that apply to the machine tool world? So with machine tools, that have PC-based controls like the Okuma OSP, it's possible to add some of these applications directly to the machine tool control. So this allows the OEMs access, or anyone for that matter, but access to see what's going on even when they can't be there. So in the case of a service issue, maybe the Akuma service department needs to see the IO monitor screen so they can diagnose an issue that's going on. You can see in this image here, I have control of the machine tool screen. You can see my little icon there kind of on the left-hand side. And one of our software engineers is in the other building on the actual machine tool. So I'm driving the machine from my desk while he's on the machine across the street. So oftentimes we try to talk customers how to navigate to particular screens so they can check on something, but that can be challenging because they're not so familiar with some of the screens like we are. So there's also the issue of communication and hoping that the customer or distributor or whoever is actually relaying the correct information that we're asking for. So we might ask pointed questions and they think they're giving us the right information, but maybe they're misunderstanding or just not relaying exactly. So having remote access in that case can be invaluable. Same can be said on the application side of the world. Many times we try and chase down issues with program formatting, offset issues, parameter issues. Those can all be tricky to diagnose at times. So by having the ability to see what's going on, this can be a tremendous help. Obviously, someone could email us a program to evaluate, but seeing exactly when and where the issue occurs and where is the program stopping and hanging up, we can single block through lines. We can see where the cursor is when it gets hung up, things like that. That helps a lot in actually diagnosing what's going on. So some of those conditions can only be seen on the machine. So this gives us helpful clues to finding out what the real issue is. There were many months when the Akuma applications and service department couldn't travel at all because of COVID. So this was one way to put eyes on the machine without being there. And even once COVID restrictions were reduced a little bit, there was a lot of us, specifically at Akuma, that were still regulated to customer visits only within driving distance. So we were kind of on a no-fly thing there for a while. So if we couldn't drive there, we couldn't get there. So for the customers that were beyond driving distance, we had to have some other way to help them. So this kind of became the tool of choice. We adopted it internally, Microsoft Teams specifically, and used it and got familiar with it internally. So it was a natural fit for us to put this on the control. We've actually used Teams with Dr. Feldhausen on numerous occasions to help sort out some minor issues to get the MU8000 Laser EX up and running. Even though Oak Ridge is only about 4 hours from Akuma in Charlotte, it's still much easier to just jump on a Teams call, jump onto the machine so we can remotely diagnose what's going on, try and get him up and running in a matter of an hour or less instead of a 4-hour drive. One specific example where this really saved the day for us and for a customer, basically during the height of COVID-19, we had an Akuma customer in South America that was trying to get a Fastum cell integrated and up and running. For those not familiar with Fastum cells, that's basically a big row of pallets, flexible manufacturing system. So your machine tool can run lights out, run for hours, if not days on end. Very complex in the setup and integration between the machine tool and this cell. So travel to that country had been totally shut down, fully restricted. So there's no way anyone from Akuma or Fastums could actually travel there, even if we wanted to. But because of the ability to put Microsoft Teams on the control, one of our electrical engineers was able to take control of the customer's machine, make some necessary changes to the PLC ladder, and ultimately got the cell up and running probably in a matter of a few hours roughly. But the ladder modifications are something that we're not going to put in the hands of the end user. It's very dangerous in the wrong hands. So that's something only a factory person is going to do. And without the ability to do this over something like Microsoft Teams, there's no way this could have been possible. So to say the least, the customer was ecstatic that we were able to sort out his issue. And I feel like we were very responsive in a time of basically global crisis where pretty much there's no other way we would have been able to get this happen.
I'm going to jump in there, Chris. I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. So I know we worked back and forth on doing some service calls, working through parameter pages and work offsets and such. But you bring up an interesting point of someone remotely controlling your controller. Like that's a nice feature in Teams where you can take control of the screen and click around. And on our machine here, I've remoted into the windows in the background and, dump programs in MDI. But what are the limitations and how far can you push it on taking control of the tool, like when I load a program, can I load it in and run it through CAS, or are there certain things that we should be doing or should not be doing?
So some things are kind of locked out still. Like we could access cycle start if we wanted to get really tricky, but generally speaking, you can't access cycle start, things like that, from a mouse pointer on the desktop. So we more use it for things like navigating to parameter pages. Maybe we want to look at something on the Windows side, maybe the data management card, IOs, things like that. We can make changes to the control also, so you have to be careful. I think some of the sessions we did, we showed how you can make an offset change or a parameter change. So my keyboard and mouse works perfectly fine, just like screen sharing on anything else. So you do have to be mindful of what you're doing, and be careful with that. So there are some limitations, obviously, with hard buttons. We could go in and force bits and things like that if we wanted to force a button on or off. So stuff like that is possible, but we try not to use it that way if we don't have to. More as a diagnosis tool, I guess, than operational tool.
Just to follow up on that, Chris, before you roll on that one, because I'm sort of writing down some questions and trying to shoot on some of that stuff. So the starting, right? So hit the cycle start button and so forth. So you're saying it's possible, but right, I mean, you really got to dig into it and so forth, and it's. I think this is one of the things that people are a little concerned about. Oh gosh, the machine can start up on its own, but the reality is these things do not start up on their own.
No, not at all. It's not. You're not going to accidentally click something and the machine's going to take off.
Right.
So obviously this is stuff that we try to do with the utmost care anyway. We rarely are trying to diagnose something we are trying to run, right? If you have a program that's running, we might just sit back and watch, tell you to put it in single block, step your way through it so we can see, what lights are on at the top. Like here, you can see there's a TD light that's in blue, there's an ATC light, things like that. What lights are on, what conditions are being met, and where might the problems be based on some of that information. And that's hard to ask someone sometimes, that isn't familiar with what light you're asking for, things like that, because not all the lights are labeled. Some of them are just pictures. So without knowing what you're looking at or no one being very familiar with all of them, it's difficult.
Right. And that fits in with a lot of the discussions we've been having. People are always afraid, we've got some point of time, I'm sure we're going to get into things like artificial intelligence. Oh, well, it's going to take my job, or automation or robotics and so forth. And the reality is, you're not going to be running this machine remotely because, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you really do want a person down at the machine single blocking it through and so forth to make sure that you're not smashing anything up. It's doing all the right stuff and the whole bit. Because again, for you to try and say, oh, hey, is that doing right? Or we got a lot of chatter, or we got a problem here? That's where you have the person there, and you just can't beat the person there. But like you said, you can be monitoring other things and so forth that the person may not have some serious expertise in. And in fact, we'll get into that, because I think that allows us to really do some amazing things with the machines that you might not have the expertise to do, but now you can bring the expert in sort of at the right point in the whole bit. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get back to your presentation, but it's very cool.
Yeah, you're exactly right, though. I mean, that's to start remotely is a little bit suicidal. Take it at your own risk, I guess. Even people that have done this for a long time, if you've ever wrecked one, which there's two types of people, right? Those that haven't and those that lie about, or those that have and those that lie about it. And so distance to go, single block, and rapid override are your best friends in just about every case, till you're very comfortable with it. So let's jump back in here. So that's kind of the gist of the remote. Again, it works with other things. We've done it with TeamViewer for a long time in the past. Other applications would work just the same. So to that point, now we'll kind of switch gears a little bit to machine monitoring. So another thing that's become much more widely adopted since COVID has hit is monitoring your machine tool remotely, because you can't be in the office all the time. So the concept of doing this is not really anything new, but I don't really think a lot of people appreciated the value of it until they weren't able to go walk out on the shop floor to check something, since they had to be working remotely. So now it became a lot bigger deal for them. So many shops you go into, it's still a common occurrence where you go in and you see the shop supervisor or the foreman walking around. He's got his clipboard, making notes on what jobs are running, when will they could be completed, things of that nature. What's the parts per hour, all these things. And this works, and it's worked for a lot of years. But there's also a lot of data not being captured here. So, he's getting a few certain little bits and pieces, but without any hard evidence, the supervisor kind of has to take the operator at his word or at her word for how the job is running. If there's any issues going on, then you add in the variable of maybe a second or third shift where, kind of everything bad happens on night shift. Get varying production numbers. It's a real mess to try and forecast things when you kind of have all these variables that you're fighting. So without any actual hard data, all the supervisor can do is kind of go off their experience and make a best guess. But that's kind of have varying results at best in a lot of cases. So there's a multitude of choices when it comes to monitoring your equipment. There's solutions that fit just about any budget, as well as almost any piece of equipment, depending on what you're trying to do. So many of these pieces of industrial equipment can be connected using the MT Connect adapter. So MT Connect is a manufacturing standard communication protocol that allows many different types of equipment to output data in a consistent format, which allows these machine monitoring softwares to output useful overall equipment effectiveness information to the end user. I think maybe in future Tom and Lonnie chat, you're going to go a little deeper into MT Connect, so that should be interesting for people to hear as well. So for everyone unfamiliar with this, it seems like a very daunting task if you're trying to implement this in your shop floor, but really the most important step to take is just the first one. Just figure out how to get into it and just get started. Arguably, the most important piece of data to worry about, at least in my opinion, is the stack light condition. So is my machine tool running? If it's not, then why is it not running? And if it's not running, is my machine tool actually making money? So just knowing that your machine is running or not can help tremendously, that people kind of take for granted sometimes. So the supervisor with the clipboard, they can look out over the shop floor, see which red lights are on, which green lights are on, and where they are. And that's effective, but only to a point. And even when he or she sees a yellow light or a red light out there, then they have to go investigate why. Maybe they have to go chase down the operator because they're not standing in front of the machine. With remote machine monitoring, anyone can see from anywhere, basically, what the run status of the equipment is. So they can use that data after that to make intelligent decisions on what to do next. So you can kind of see the graphic on the left. We have some yellow lights. We have some red lights. So the yellow light, in this case, this is a screenshot from Akuma Connect, which is, or Connect Plan, excuse me, which is basically our homegrown monitoring system. So the periodic maintenance approaching, that might be a flag for the maintenance guy that, hey, I need to prepare to take this machine offline in the near future. That way I can perform some sort of maintenance. So we need to maybe shuffle priorities, move jobs around. And then the red light is maintenance period exceeded in this case. So that's kind of critical level has been reached. So we need to do something with it. So those are easy indicators without ever having to go out to the machine tool. If you have a 5-machine shop, right, it's probably not a big deal because everything's kind of condensed. But say you have 100 machines, it's not so easy to just monitor everything all at once without constantly making laps around your facility. So what if companies had a tool that would allow them to see basically in real time what was happening on the shop floor? Would this allow your company to make smarter decisions because they were more educated about the actual performance, not the estimated performance? Many shops put large monitors on the shop floor once they implement something like this. So there's full visibility for all the employees at all the time. So you kind of have to get people to buy in and see the real value here. The intent is not to spy on your employees or to call them out for underperforming, but instead it's to help them hit all their production goals and identify weaknesses in the production system. So in the places that we've installed systems like this, and whether it's our system or someone else's, typically it seems like human nature drives people to want to do better when they can see the metrics, right? What gets measured gets done is a common phrase. And nobody wants to be in last place. Nobody wants to have their machine less efficient than the next machine or the next person. So in many cases, we've seen people, improve 10 to 15% just by putting a monitor on the floor.
Chris, let me just jump in there because I really want to drive this point home. There is a big concern about people saying, oh, well, we're monitoring you, and if you're not productive enough, we're going to come after you and the whole bit. This is absolutely, I mean, I just have not seen this happen, right? I mean, really what you're looking at, and by the way, there are lots of privacy laws in place. And for those of you that think about sort of international and so forth, it depends on where you're at, what the privacy laws look like. For example, European Union versus United States versus China, for example. But I think a key thing here, and we have to have the right mentality. This is about, look, and it's just like, when you think about quality, right? It's not, I'm going to inspect things and find out, where my problem is. You can't inspect quality into it. You find out, hey, where can we help the process in terms of quality? Where is our variation coming from? And let's reduce that variation. And it's the same thing here. This is working with your personnel to say, okay, what are you struggling with? It could be that something is, very, very complicated to load a part into a machine. Sure. And so can we make it easier? And I was just talking with a team this morning about redesigning a part instead of having a square part. And it doesn't really matter the orientation of the square peg and the square hole. Let's make it a round part. So now you don't have to line up those edges. You just stick it in however it goes. And also the other thing I think that's very important is it also helps you to identify what other training we can have available, right, to people. So if somebody is having a hard time, and we see this with students, having a hard time maybe reading a micrometer or calipers or whatever, they're just not repeatable on their measurements. You can say, hey, let's take you aside, let's work with you to get you that training so that you are good, right? And it's not about, hey, we're going to get you. It's about, we're going to help you. Because, I mean, one of the things, and I'm just going to point this out, everybody is complaining, I can't get well-trained people, I can't get people in my shop. Absolutely. And so the last thing you want to do is start to get rid of people. What you want to do is make them better, make their lives easier and so forth, and make them much more cost effective, if you will. So this is really a move in that direction, but we've got to get that right mindset. I mean, bottom line is, people like, why don't want you tracking me? If you use Google Maps or, Apple Maps and so forth, yeah. Guess where all that information is coming from? You see the green on the highways and so forth. They're tracking all those phones going down the road, yeah. Right? And so, and their people don't seem to mind. And I think it's the same thing here. We just have to realize that this is really going to be helping people out. If we're not out to, people are not out to get you. So forth. Anyways, I'll stop there, but I really want to drive that home.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, it's, even something simple as tool life, maybe you're pushing too aggressively on a lathe and you're burning up roughing inserts, things like that. So, that machine is stopped more than it's running because the operator, they have to change out the insert, but they haven't said anything to anyone, something like that, where, you can identify problems like that kind of by looking at the big picture, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, actually, since you sort of mentioned sort of the insert and so forth, things like chatter. And if you saw last one where he had, JD Karandikar on here, basically he was talking about the fact that, in many instances, chatter, you shouldn't turn down your feeds and speeds and depth of cut. You should crank it up because the machines can handle it. You just want to get out of this vibrating mode. And so, again, you could pick this up and say, oh, hey, yep, we saw chatter. So just like you're talking about, we saw chatter. And we see what the corrective action was. It went down, but now you could turn around and basically tell the person, hey, we can work with you. Because I get it. If the machine's really rattling, you might not want to really crank it up because you're afraid it's going to explode. Sure. But now you can work with them and say, no, you're good to go, and give them some confidence and give them a little bit more experience. So it's, and then everybody's happy. So
absolutely. Cool. So depending on the machine tool and the monitoring software, it's also possible to get email or text alerts, based on different conditions. So this allows people to carry on with other tasks without feeling like they need to go check on machine progress constantly. You can check on your facility regardless of where you are. It doesn't matter if you're at lunch or you're on a business trip, maybe you're on vacation and you want to check in, you can see what's going on from anywhere. We have applications on the Akuma machine tool where basically if an alarm comes up, it will send you an email or a text with a screenshot of the alarm. And you can set that to depend on who gets, A level, B level, C level alarms and where those alarms go and who gets to see those. Maintenance personnel, for example, could get alarms or alerts when there's maintenance needed. Say maybe it's a D level alarm for a way lube or something like that. They can get alerts for things like that the programmer doesn't need to see. Or maybe your shop supervisor only wants to see A and B level, things like that. So you can kind of custom tailor that to fit your needs. You can also just jump right on if you're remotely monitoring and look on the dashboard and see, what's going on in your shop floor as well. You plan take equipment offline doing this, things like that. So in the larger shop case, the supervisor can also see it from his desk without having to get up and go track it down. So all these things are literally at your fingertips and save a ton of time. Same as things on weekends, there's ways you can monitor or you might want to monitor things on the weekend without having to come into the shop. So it doesn't always sound like it, but everything we've talked about so far regarding machine tool monitoring comes back to data. So as manufacturing facilities continue to trend towards more automation, lights out manufacturing, remote monitoring becomes even more critical. So for example, if you have a problem on a Friday afternoon at 5:05, everyone's left for the day, you've already loaded up all your automation stuff, you think it's going to run through the weekend, you could lose an entire weekend worth of production if some silly alarm pops up and you're not aware of it. So with the ability to remotely monitor or get alerts from your equipment, you can easily see this. Maybe you can dispatch someone to come in on Saturday morning, address the problem, get the issue fixed, and get it back up and running, and minimize your downtime. As Deming once said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And this has really never been more true, especially in this case.
So I'm glad you brought that up, Chris. I'm going to jump in here. Excuse me. So I'm glad you brought this up because we use this all the time at the National Lab. We set up our Akuma machine such that different people in line management get emails. And I'll never forget the first time I set it up, I was pretty proud of myself. So I signed Dr. Kerfus up for, a few C-level alarms. And I know a few tricks to bypass interlocks, and I filled up his inbox. And this was late on a Thursday afternoon. So I went into his office the next morning, pretty proud of myself, and come to find out he actually reported them for phishing. He thought they were fake emails. So that brings up an important lesson, folks, of make sure you don't trust emails from just any machine tool, and make sure you understand what you're getting.
Well, and I got to tell you, it was absolutely the first time that I'd ever gotten an email from a machine tool. So it made me a little suspicious. But again, I think that's it fits in really well with what Cyber Kyle was talking about during our cybersecurity discussion. So it all comes together. But yes, that was pretty funny. I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, yeah, my machine tool is sending the email. Nope. But it was awesome. I mean, it was actually really pretty cool.
Yeah, the nice thing I like about it is you get a screenshot exactly what your screen is at during that error.
Yeah.
Because if you're like me, whenever you see an error, especially in the middle of a program, the first thing you do is you hit reset a couple times. It's like muscle memory. And at that point, if you're not careful, your screen's gone, you've driven the machine tool out of an error state.
Yeah.
And so it provides a really nice snapshot of everything that was happening with that exact instance.
Absolutely. I used to use it when I was in the machine shop, not working at Akuma, to alert me to I need to come in and change a part or come away from my desk and change a part. I could set it up with just a D-level alarm, when the last tool started, something that wouldn't stop the machine. It would let it keep running through its cycle. But I would use that. Basically, we didn't have any machine monitoring at the time at the shop I was at. So we would just use that, or I would use that to give me a little reminder that, hey, your part's going to be done in 5 minutes or whatever, it's starting its deburr tool path or something like that. So just quick, simple little notifications to make your life a lot easier without having to continuously look at your watch or I forgot to go change a part, so now I lost 30 minutes or things like that. And then finally, with the last slide, so to recap what we've discussed, we can look at the images kind of starting at the top left. So first, visualize your factory floor monitoring, right? What system's right for your company? What is it you want to do? What are you trying to do with this? How are you trying to make yourself better by looking at all the things that are going on? Next, analyze the data coming from your equipment. So which data points are important to you? Literally, there's hundreds of data points that can be collected, and many of them are just background noise, right? For a lot of companies, maybe people don't care about all the temperature sensors and all the other things. They just want to know if it's running or not. You really want to drill down to what you want to monitor that benefits your business the most. For example, Akuma has something called OMCS. It's Akuma Monitoring and Control System, where we put a bunch of industrial sensors. It's completely configurable. But things like that are data that people want to use, whether it's coolant temperature or coolant pH, electrical cabinet temperature, things like this. We can put these sensors in, monitor all these things, collect all these data points, look at any trending, are we having problems for certain reasons, whatever, just kind of keep on top of all the things that we want to check. Then you want to plan what you want to do with the data that you're receiving. So how are you going to use this data to optimize your facility? So whether it's a job shop, that's making something new every other day, or maybe it's a production facility making dedicated products that are their own product, all types of shops can benefit from understanding their overall equipment effectiveness and try and make better decisions on how to move their business forward based on this. And then finally, you want to execute your plan to improve your efficiencies. So it's great to talk about it. It's great to plan, but eventually you have to do it. So what are you going to do to implement the changes you believe are needed to take your business to the next level? And it all starts with understanding what's happening at your facility, and you can do that with the use of data. So I will stop sharing.
And I am unmuting, and I'm going to bring up my notes. That was great. That was great, Chris. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Let's see here. So, actually, one of the things I'm super curious about, just because you've got such a neat controller there, right? I'm thinking, so if you could give us, we've got like sort of 12 minutes, so I know there's a lot of stuff we want to talk about, but you've got ThinkNC, right? So you've got the sort of open platform, open architecture, and the whole bit going on. If you give us just a really short blurb on, hey, what is ThinkNC all about? And then how does this type of capability link into something like a ThinkNC to really, you sort of, so it's sort of like having two cool things going on, and they come together to give you something like better than being doubly cool, to put it in the vernacular.
Yeah, absolutely. The Think acronym stands for the Intelligent Numerical Control. So that's kind of something that we came up with on the US side of the world. But basically, we have an open architecture platform. The API is available to anyone. So basically, if you can dream it up and you can write PC code to do it, within reason, we can do it on the machine tool. So your imagination is kind of the limiting factor. We have people that write applications to do all kinds of cool things. If your barcode scanner is on your router, things like that, you can plug a USB barcode scanner right into your control, scan your router. That can pull your program off the server, put it on your machine tool, things like that, all through a Windows application. We have another customer. They make axles for vehicles. So with a Windows application and some keystrokes on the screen, they have a pretty elaborate macro program, and they enter a few touchscreen choices, and they can make any configuration of axle that they want to make without ever changing a program or calling a program, things like that. So it's really pretty interesting, all the things you can do on the Windows side of things. We have a myakuma.com is our app store. So we have probably 40 different applications on there. Most of them are free, just all kinds of different stuff that you can do or people have done with their machine tools. We have some weather alert apps. So say people in Florida, they get thunderstorms, every 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the summer. It can alert you for severe weather in the area. So maybe before you start that next cycle, you want to think about it, and maybe just sit tight for a few minutes until the storm passes through. We have the ability to lock out the touchscreen with a application that basically locks the screen. You can password protect it. You can just put a message up there to let people know, hey, please don't mess with this. I'm in the middle of a setup. I just went to lunch, whatever. I mean, for years, people have taped a piece of paper up on the screen or the door or whatever. And, that's reliable to a point, I guess. But, there's better ways and better mousetraps to do that stuff now.
Let me unmute there. No, I think that's excellent. And you lend it to, you lend it to, so there's a lot of stuff where you can do pattern matching and so forth. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been to companies and they've, we got this problem with the machine, but only in the morning. And then you like, oh, well, I wonder why. So it's not a shift thing and so forth. And what you find is oh, well, in the morning, they come in and they pull out the coffee maker and they put it next to the machine and they turn it on. You get this thing just generating heat, right? And just sort of messes with things just just while they're having their morning coffee and so forth, right? And so there's a lot of, I think, good opportunity even to collect data to start to do some pattern matching, which, you know, to a certain extent, it's a lot of, you know, you can even get into some of the artificial intelligence, but just doing some pattern matching. And by the way, that's what we do anyway. You hear the machine, right? The machine doesn't sound right. I mean, that's what a human being is doing. And you know, so this is going to do something, you know, not only you could listen to the machine, but you could also take a look at a whole bunch of other information coming off of the machine. And hey, this isn't right. This is not what this machine does. So that's actually pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
So to touch on artificial intelligence, our Connect Plan software also has some artificial intelligence that's built in as well. So basically, you have a choice at the machine where you can set it to, I don't have material, I don't have an operator, I'm in the setup mode, things like that. So that data can be captured and you can understand what your asset is doing throughout the day. But obviously, if there's no operator, he's not going to set it to no operator. So what Connect Plan does, it learns your patterns over time and it makes intelligent data-driven decisions based on historical data, basically, that knows that, okay, every day from 10 to 10:15, Joe goes to have a cigarette. So, you know, there's no operator during this time frame. So it can log that, and that gives you some better understanding of what's actually happening, you know, on your shop floor with AI.
Yeah. And, you know, and the other thing that's actually pretty cool is not only that, it may know that, hey, Joe wants to go have a cigarette. By the way, not good, Joe. You shouldn't be smoking. But, you know, that being said, you know, look, if it says, hey, Ivan, I know that this guy wants to take a, you know, at a certain time, take a 10-minute break, can actually work with the operator to say, okay, now is a good time to go take that break because everything is running. You know, the part just went in. It's going to be 12 minutes before the next part comes along. And again, it just sort of helps them out. And bottom line there, if you think about it, if I'm the guy taking the break, I'm super happy because now the boss is like, yep, you're off taking your break or whatever, and we're still going, and the boss is going to be happy with you, et cetera, et cetera. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we touched on it before, but you'd be surprised the amount of places that just put a monitor out on the shop floor and production instantly goes up because people want to be number one on the leaderboard. They can say they're not competitive or whatever, but it's like, you know, if they're making X number of hours of, you know, spindle up time per day and their neighbors, you know, +1, they want to beat that guy.
Yeah.
So it's just.
And you know, one of the things we looked at, you mentioned spindle uptime, and again, people are like, well, you could spoof the spindle, blah blah, this that, and a whole bit. But I mean, I think everybody, you know, with good intention, say the spindle is running, I'm making parts, you know, I'm hogging metal, right? And spindle not running, I'm not. And so it was interesting. One of the companies we worked with, they were making turbine blades, but they just make one off, so they're not making 100 or 1,000 of these things. Yeah, I need a replacement one. I'm going to make this one. And so the thing we did is said, okay, well, hey, spindle up. You know, making the part, spindle on off, making the part. And so we came back over a 12-month period and they would just make one every, you know, month of one particular kind, but we can give them we could do their control charts, their, you know, X bar and S charts. And so we could tell them, hey, what was the time to make this thing and what are the standard deviations, all the stuff you want to know. So that was cool. But then what I noticed is, okay, spindle running, making the part. Okay, then spindle not running, not making the part. And here's my next part. Here's the, you know, next spindle running. And you know, I thought, oh, well, you know, this downtime over here is the setup time for the next part. So now we can go off and we can say, hey, give us the setup time for this thing. And setup time was all over the place. It was way out of control. Now, and of course, I mean, hindsight is 2020, right? What did you learn? Well, look, if this part and this part are really similar, then tooling, you know, changeover is really small. I don't have to change any over. But if they're very different, I've got a lot of tools to change. All right. So what do we learn? Well, it's something that, of course, we know. Try and keep all the same parts together, but this is not how they operated because they just didn't think about it. It's like, okay, what's the next part to make? And I'll just go set it up and so forth. And so we got something like a 15 or 20% improvement in terms of productivity on the machine just by saying, hey, let's group these things together and doing something we know we should do, right? But we just had never thought about that.
Yeah, exactly. So without capturing that, though, you never know it, never think about it.
Yeah. I'm pivoting just a little bit because one of the things that, you know, you hear about, so the big buzzword is democratization of advanced manufacturing. And really the idea is how do we get latest and greatest technology out even into the and really let people use this technology out, you know, into the small shops. And you know, I'll preface this by saying, you know, Tom will laugh because he always hears me saying this. You know, I grew up in a machine shop in the 70s. I go to a lot of these shops and they have your latest and greatest equipment. So it has all the bells and whistles, but they're almost running it exactly like we ran it back in the 70s, right? You know, with the exception of they're not using paper tape anymore. You know, but the reality is, Can you talk to us a little bit about it? And what we'd love to do is say, hey, shops out there, you've got all these great bells and whistles, all these great capabilities on the machine. Use them. And it's not just, oh, well, hey, I don't want to use them. It's all this newfangled stuff and the whole bit, but really use them because you're going to make more money. You're going to make people's lives easier and so forth. And so the whole idea of democratizing is I can really level the playing field. These guys can use the small, the small mom and pop shops can be as effective and as efficient at using the tools as well as the big players out there and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about how you might use some of this stuff to really leverage the heck out of the latest and greatest state-of-the-art capabilities on your machines?
Absolutely. So I kind of equate this a little bit like your cell phone, right?
Yeah.
Basically everybody has a smartphone. I mean, some people are a little antique in their technology with Blackberries and other things, whatever, but
okay. Yeah, I got that. Kyle is out there. Cyber Kyle's out there smiling right now.
Kyle put me up to that.
One for you.
But anyway, everyone has a smartphone of some sort, basically, that they carry around, right? And the probably least utilized function on that smartphone is using it as a telephone, right? So machine tool is the same way. So I have a machine tool, and a lot of the older school people say, all I want it to do is make parts. Well, it can do that, and it does it very well. But you're giving up all these other things that it can do. So it makes parts, and it's going to do that all day. But your phone makes phone calls, but you use it for your map, your music, your texting, your whatever. So why not use all the things that your machine tool can do, like Windows applications, remote monitoring, data collection, all these other things that it can do to help you and to make your life easier and more efficient. So why not use that to your advantage instead of just using it as something to cut metal?
Right, and I'll just add, and I know I've said this probably 2 or 3 times here. Stephen's going to be like, "Oh man, not again." But the reality is, I mean, just think about the weather. I'm going out. I want to check the weather to see, where it cold is going to rain the whole bit. I'm using my smartphone to access a constellation of NOAA satellites beaming down terabytes of data, then having it integrated into the ground Doppler radar and so forth, and all these weather station information into supercomputing models to tell me, hey, should I wear a heavier coat today? And so forth. So the reality is, to your point, Chris, it's not only, hey, I can do kind of cool things, but man, I have access to unbelievable power and resources, because, we've made it easy. So yeah, it's not only, hey, I can do other cool things, but man, oh man, I can use the same resources that the Boeings and the General Motors and the Fords of the world are using. Yep.
And speaking of terabytes of data, and Tom Feldhausen can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you guys are collecting roughly a terabyte of data a week off the MU8000 hybrid machine that it has in there. And that's more than many people will put on a remote hard drive in their life, if you think about it. I mean, a terabyte of data, depending on what you're doing, whether you're gathering pictures or whatever, like my parents, for instance, they wouldn't fill up a terabyte of data in 5 lifetimes for what they do on a computer. So, the amount of data that's available is unbelievable. Now you have to be able to do something with it and know what you want to do with it, or else it's just kind of background noise. But it's out there for the taking. You just got to want to go get it.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. Tom, you had something to say there?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Chris, without data, it's just an opinion. It's so I've got a question for you. It's more of a question that the viewers might have is, what happens if I don't have an Office 365 subscription, or do I need an account for every single machine tool, or is there a much simpler way to actually get Teams to run on my controller?
So we've kind of played with a bunch of different scenarios with that. As far as we would probably have to have an account if it's shipped on the machine tool, but the way we did some testing was basically we just ran the app through the internet, and I used a personal account. Casey used his account. And we just basically did an invitation that way. So there's ways to get around some of that stuff. If you were going to network an entire fleet of machines, you might look at it a little differently. But for a quick one-off, it's not so difficult.
Yeah, that's kind of what we've learned here is, you kind of have to have a subscription to set up a meeting, but anybody with an internet connection can accept a meeting invite. So it makes things quite easy.
Right. And you do need to be careful. I mean, not to get off, down a rabbit hole with cybersecurity, but you can't just, plug in and assume everything's going to be great all the time. You need to be mindful of what you're doing and make sure you take good care with your equipment and make sure you're protected. The Boeings of the world obviously have much greater concerns than, Joe's machine shop down the street, because likely they're not going after collecting data from him. He can still get hacked and still have problems like anyone else. So he still needs to be careful. But that's a much deeper topic, obviously, for the cybersecurity side of it.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think, and maybe we'll wrap it up here, but I do think, I mean, the bottom line is yes, you do need to be careful. You do need to take the right precautions. Now, on the other hand, you are working with some big companies and so forth, like a Microsoft, and they're going to make sure, they're going to do their best, right, to make sure that you're safe. Now, stuff still happens and so forth, but it's no different. I mean, in fact, I do find it funny. People, I don't want to say the Amazon Echo. I don't want to say her name because everybody in the podcast, they're obviously going to be lighting up in the whole bit. But the reality is like, oh, well, I would never have them there because it's listening to me. Well, we just talked about smartphones. You got a smartphone sitting, right next to you and so forth, and same type of situation. So, I think we do pretty well there, but I agree. You just have to be careful of it. So, Chris, I'm going to let you have the last word before I turn to discussions about what's coming up next on the Tom and Lonnie chat. So first of all, thank you so much for participating today. I really appreciate it. It was great stuff. And all yours for the last word.
Just thank you for having us. Akuma loves to participate in things like this, kind of to help try and move the industry forward, maybe educate people that aren't up to speed like some shops are, on what can be done and what's possible out there. And, don't be afraid to take the technology that you have and get after it.
Excellent. Yeah. And I couldn't have said it better myself. There's so much capability out there. It could make you so much more money and make your life so much easier. Let the experts help you out and sort of move you forward. So with that, I want to thank you, Chris. I want to remind everybody. So next month, we're going to start a little bit of a different format. So we won't be live. We'll be pre-recorded. As I said, we're coming up. It'll be our February show. We're going to have MT Connect. We'll have a guest. Maybe we'll even have a special guest. We're working on that one. But we're going to have some really nice expertise on MT Connect. And really what we're going to do is we're going to run MT Connect 101. Hey, here's what MT Connect is. Here's some of the things you can do with it. And then we're just going to have some chats about, what you're going to be doing with MT Connect, which, by the way, is also running on Okuma machines. All right. So I want to thank everybody. So Tom also helped us out today in terms of, getting Chris on board. Stephen, great seeing you again, as always. And listen, everybody, stay safe, stay warm. See you in February when we have the good Dr. Love back on the show. Take care.